Hey there, welcome. Today I'd like to talk about how rationality, reason, intelligence, empiricism, science, this is all part of God. This is all part of the infinite reality that we exist as. I find that there is a resistance to rationality in some spheres, and then also an attachment to false rationality in other spheres. I find there's a separation between mysticism and spirituality and rationality, and I find all of that bogus. It's just not how it is. There's a few things I'd like to comment on. So one is we often stick to reductionisms. We just stick to the science we know. We stick to the rationalities we've come to accept. Yet there is more out there. There's more than we've gathered as humans. There's more data, there's more evidence, there's more to reality than we know. We know this. This is not up for debate. We don't know everything, basically. And there are things that have been discovered and learnt by people rationally that we don't understand. We don't understand the heights of physics and biochemistry. We don't understand, every form of mathematics and calculation. We don't understand the perspective of every philosopher that utilizes logic to come to conclusions. This is okay. Like, we are in this together, so it's fine if other people have a higher level of rationality for certain things than other people do. So there is a state in which, though, we end up closing ourselves off to intelligence, to our own intelligence, to the intelligence of the universe, and to the intelligence of others, by kind of accepting some limited sense of rationality. Whether it's a specific framework we've become to attach to, or avenue of logic that we like. The physicist might really love the logic of physics, but not understand the logic of morality and meaning and happiness. The person that understands the epistemology or the epidemiology or the causation correlation of nutrition knowledge might not understand fully the logic of biochemistry, even though they know health outcomes. This can be the case for lots of things. Some people can be really attached to the logic of justice, the logic of virtue and fairness, and although that can be subjective and contain cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance and limited knowledge, so makes us not impartial towards what we decide is just and fair, that person may not be able to engage in rational thought on other spheres of things that might look like injustice or things that might not be about justice. This is always the case, and what happens is we kind of limit our mind and we don't see that it's actually unlimited, that reality is unlimited, that all these spheres of knowledge are connected by the same thread, reality. And this reality is logical. Even if we don't like to think of it that way, we like to think of it, it's just chaos, it's just entropy, it's just, impartial, impersonal. The one thing is that if the universe is chaotic, if the universe is irrational, there's no way we can trust our rationality. Not really. We can't give it a grounding, because it's just brains that have evolved in the chaos, in the fractal of, just physical laws. It doesn't necessitate that this is grounds for us to trust our rationality. And some people will stay there. Some people will say, oh, that might be the case. Maybe we can't trust our rationality. Maybe we are so imperfect and we just convince ourselves that we are rational. Other people will just stay in their boat where they're like, oh no, but my rationality, right? My rationality is right. Even though they'll accept a nihilistic, reductionist, physicalist, materialistic universe that has no grounds for explaining why we have reason and intelligence and why we feel so inclined to trust reason and intelligence. However, this is not a problem when you understand that the universe is infinite. It's infinitely more than we see. It's more than what we see as physical or physical laws. And it's basically conscious. It's intelligent. And it's not just conscious in the way we are. It's way more conscious than we are, in a way that's beyond our 100-year experience as a human being. But those inklings, those clicks, those moments of harmony, when you realize 2 + 2 = 4, when you see that there's a choice that one causes lots of suffering and one doesn't, and you just know, maybe intuitively or rationally, that one's right. One is more right than the other. There's a reason that we can study patterns and then figure out their consistencies and then reproduce them and engage with them and make predictions and have those predictions be right. Have those predictions be almost entirely right. Because it is an intelligent, rational, or rather hyper-intelligent, hyper-rational, infinite universe. It is a God that has rules. These rules might change. They might be different in a different universe or different galaxy, even on a different planet, with different molecules, ones that we haven't ever discovered. We don't know how they interact. There's rules beyond what we can see. We know there's possibly things like dark matter, dark energy, antimatter, quantum phenomena, mental phenomena that we don't fully understand. Well, God or reality is all that stuff that we don't know about as well. Reality is never what we see as human. It is always more. And that is a very important thing to understand, because that is part of the rational reason stream of consciousness. That reasoning process is equally part of the universe. It's equally part of God. We can engage with it. We can trust it. But trusting rationality has no such thing as stagnation, because that reason's always going to be questioning, always going to be engaging in new understanding, new data, new evidence. It's going to wiggle out of any inconsistent, irrational state of being. And I think we're at this point where there's this funny, irrational attachment to a subset of science or materialism, even though we have all sorts of evidence to show and prove that, well, reality is more than that, we just don't know it yet. But we irrationally attach to it as if it's fact, as if it's the end-all, be-all of knowledge. And then what happens is that when people engage with spiritual people or open-minded people that are trying to see beyond our limits, trying to see the news, trying to see what else there is in our experience, in our consciousness in this world, there's a disconnect, there's a rift, there's a lack of true communication, a lack of true connection, because people that have attached to a framework of reality, an irrational framework that begets limitation, stagnancy, and rejects some other viewpoint that suggests an unlimited reality, because that person or that party is attached to that and they won't move from that, no true communication and connection can happen, because they're staying in their illusion. And all of science is a progressively evolving retraction of illusion. Progressively evolving, exponentially evolving in some ways, to see what's true, to see what's real. None of it is static. None of it's like, oh, these are the facts. There's always a chance for more, always a chance for difference, always room to re-understand, to learn more. But this isn't the attitude a lot of people take. And that's irrational. That's not rational. That's not reasonable. That's not even in the framework of the scientific method. It's not in the framework of induction. It's not in the framework of deduction. It is just an attachment to a framework or a subset of knowledge. And instead of engaging in new information, we stick to that. Additionally, there's this funny dichotomy of kind of like empathy, this sense of justice and fairness and empathy that actually opposes rationality, yet a lot of people try to like attach to both, and it creates a conflict, it creates a cognitive distance, it creates an inconsistency and an incoherence. So this is, you can see this even in moral arguments, trying to argue deontological ethics versus consequentialist utilitarian ethics. There will always be some weird tension when a principle like never murder, let's say it's a principle that we just uphold, comes into conflict with the infinite variability of reality, the context. There will be contexts where no killing produces the best result for all beings. I'm not saying that's common. I'm not saying we should think in those terms, because obviously people might misconstrue it. So it's a good law, no, don't kill. But logically, rationally, in an infinite universe with so many possibilities, there will be moments where that is not a universal thing. But this is the same for a lot of like activism these days, or a lot of perspectives people have about minorities and people that struggle, people that are engaging in a life that is filled with hardship, what seems like unfairness. And I agree, there's a lot of that. And these people should be helped. They should be fed, clothed, protected, given shelter, given medicine, given education. But people make irrational frameworks around this. One could be just weird separations that don't make sense, like only helping one minority group rather than just people struggling in general, only looking at people under certain contexts, certain groups of people, rather than everyone that's in need. People will actively dislike and hate what they see as like the negative group. They will irrationally generalize all people of a certain group because it's not the minority, or it's not the one they're focusing on. And so then there's hate, there's negativity towards them. Not saying all these people are not spiritual or not religious or don't understand God, but I find a lot of the time there's this weird disconnect where there is an irrational motivation to separate people into certain groups and help ones they see as the underdog in some way, and even go to as far as hating the not underdog, and at the same time being very attached to materialism, attached to certain levels of science and empiricism, and rejecting God. A lot of atheists, a lot of agnostics, and what happens is they just procure irrational behaviors and reactions and judgments towards the world, and then they don't shake from their limited standpoint. They feel justified in it, they feel solid in it, even though it's creating suffering, it's creating another sense of separation. And I'm mentioning this because I see it a lot. I still see it quite often. But what is happening is that they're not engaging in the reality of endless interconnectedness of all beings, even the evil beings, even the beings that seem awful. They are here. They don't necessarily require the same attention, the same affection as people in need, people struggling, but it doesn't change the fact that we're all in this together. And that is even the case materialistically. We're all on the same planet, breathing the same air, utilizing the same set of earthly resources, polluting the same atmosphere, engaging in the cascading of natural disasters. And even economically, we're in an interconnected world at this point. So even just materialistically, scientifically, we are in this together. There's no need to create irrational separations between groups of people. There's no reason to create irrational judgments, hate, or even irrational concentrations towards certain groups. Here we should understand what's important. Why do we want to help people in need, minorities, people that have been oppressed, areas of life that have been neglected? Because they have suffered unfairly. So let's focus on helping those that suffer unfairly. That knows no bounds. There's no line, there's no separation that is going to tell you this group suffered and this one didn't. There will be people that suffer in all groups, in all categories. The point is that we want to stop suffering. That is the rational aspect of the moral framework. The reason we want to help is because suffering fucking sucks. And we know it ourselves. And we don't want it. It's the essence of suffering. That's what suffering is. Experiences we don't want. That's the definition of it. And then we find out how to change that, how to accurately change that. Not imaginarily change it, but find the actual causes. That's the rational approach. What factually causes the thing we want to stop, and we change it. In an infinite universe, we can do that. There's no end. There's no limitation. There's no problem that we can't solve. It just requires persistence and patience. It requires connection and cooperation. And so if we are trying to live a life that actively separates groups of people and cancels others and pushes others away and judges people just for the class or their area of life or the way they look, the way they talk, the job they have, color of their skin, well, that's just irrational. We are creating an artificial limitation. We're disconnecting ourselves from the whole, and thus ourself and God. And we're disconnecting ourselves from our own goal, our goal to make a better world. And in science, in the realm that we call rational, we gotta realize that this is not the end. There's more to figure out. There's absolutely nothing in science that can say the universe isn't infinite, that reality is some lifeless, materialistic set of laws. There's nothing. There's nothing in it that says that. And that's the truth. Like those are assumptions. Those are interpretations of what we already know as limited data. And to truly engage with rationality, we must realize there's more than meets the eye. And it doesn't matter whether you call it God or spirit or universe or laws. It's just what is. And to be connected with what is, we must embrace the stream of reason that comes with us, the endless stream of reasoning. We don't need to reject it. We don't need to push it away. We don't need to limit it. We don't need to put it in a box and say, oh no, this is the framework it must stay in. We can let it explore and evolve and change. And that is a reflection of our infinite nature, which has no stagnancy, which is never one structured thing. It's always changing, it's always growing, and it's always completely connected with the whole. So I just wanted to say this because I find there's a lot of rationality that's like anti-spiritual. There's a lot of rationality that thinks it's rational, but it's actually just irrational limitation without evidence to believe in the limitation, even though they base their whole framework around having evidence. There's a lot of irrationality in regards to justice, which we go at with a sense of reason, like we were believing in justice because we trust our reasoning capacity. Sometimes we believe in an irrational universe, but then trust our own rationality. So in all these avenues, we're running into a paradox. We're running into hypocrisy. We're running into something incoherent. And I want to say, you don't need to do that. None of those things. The reason they're incoherent is because they are. And there's something more substantial going on. That is, our rationality is just a part of realizing the infinite self, the infinite God that we all are. And rationality is part of that God, part of the intelligence of this one grand being. Thank you so much for watching. Om Sai Ram.